The maitre d' at the Waverly Inn barely glanced up as Bethany, draped in designer silk, laughed a little too loudly. She pulled my hand from my pocket, displaying my watch to her friends. "See, this old thing," she'd said, a casual swipe at the silver face my grandfather had worn. Then she leaned in, her smile sharp. "He insists on tracking everything, darling, even our love." The check lay between us, already signed, for a figure I knew we couldn't spare. Hank smoothed the laminated chart on the kitchen table, his finger tracing the upward slope of the line he'd drawn. Each month represented another percentage point towards their goal. The Lakehouse? He had pictured it for years, a quiet place with a sturdy dock and maybe a small motorboat. A real home, solid and undeniable, unlike the rented rooms of his youth, the constant drift after his father's last bad bet. This chart wasn't just numbers, it was a promise. "Look," he said to Bethany, his voice holding more enthusiasm than he usually allowed, "we're almost at 40%. By next summer, if we stay on track, we could make an offer." Bethany hummed, her eyes fixed on the glowing screen of her phone. She was scrolling through social media, a faint smile playing on her lips, a world away. "Yes, great, honey," she said, not looking up. The phone light cast a cool blue glow on her face. Her indifference was a familiar sting. Then, without prelude, she announced, "Cindy Lou just booked Aspen. We leave Tuesday. Everything's paid for." She finally lifted her gaze, a bright, careless spark in her blue eyes. "Our joint card, of course." Hank felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. The carefully plotted line on the chart blurred. "Bethany, we can't," he said, his voice flat. He pointed to the column marked discretionary. "That's 2 months of savings." "The Lakehouse?" She rolled her eyes, a dramatic gesture that always seemed to punctuate her arguments. "Oh, Hank, you're so boring. You only live once." She snapped her phone shut, finally giving him her full attention, though it felt more like an indictment. "Cindy Lou got an amazing deal on the chalet. It was too good to pass up." He remembered meeting her in the bustling lobby of Blackstone, where he was already making a name for himself in financial analysis. Bethany, then a vivacious interior designer in Manhattan, had walked in with a client, her laugh echoing with an uninhibited joy that had instantly drawn his attention. He was all quiet intensity, driven by the memory of poverty and the need for security. She was everything bright and unburdened. "Most people just see the numbers," he'd told her on their first date, sitting across from her in a quiet Italian place. "I'm more interested in what's behind your eyes." She had laughed then, a genuine sound that had somehow reached past his guard. They talked for hours, his clear path forward, her dreams of her own design firm. "To knowing exactly what we want," she toasted, clinking her glass against his. Their courtship moved swiftly, a whirlwind of city lights and whispered promises. Moving in together felt like a natural progression. He proposed on a crisp autumn hike in the Berkshires, the leaves turning brilliant shades of red and gold. "When you know," he'd said, the words feeling untrue and solid as the ground beneath their feet. She had said yes, her eyes shining. Their wedding, held in the grand halls of the New York Public Library, was a spectacle of white roses and flowing champagne, largely orchestrated and paid for by Mr. Sterling Caldwell, Bethany's father. Mr. Caldwell, a man whose handshake was as cold as his smile, had pulled Hank aside after the toasts. "God knows what she sees in you, Hank," he'd said, his voice low, his eyes fixed somewhere beyond Hank's shoulder. "Could have had her pick of men with actual family connections." Bethany, overhearing a sliver of the conversation, had rushed to his defense, her fierce loyalty shining through. Yet, even in her passion, she'd subtly emphasized his rapidly climbing career and financial potential, a detail Hank had overlooked, caught up in the warmth of her affection. He had wanted her love, not her father's grudging approval based on his earnings. For the first 5 years, their marriage seemed a perfect balance. His methodical planning, her spontaneous bursts of creativity. He supported her fully when she launched her own design firm, seeing it as another shared foundation being laid, another step towards the stable life he craved. The small disagreements about money began around year 5. His careful budgets, the spreadsheets he meticulously maintained, became her financial straitjacket. She chafed at the constraints, seeing them as limitations on her freedom, while he saw them as the only way to build something lasting. Hank's past was a constant, quiet hum beneath the surface of his life. His gambler father, always chasing the next big win, always losing, always leaving his mother to pick up the pieces, working extra shifts at the diner. That deep-seated fear of financial insecurity, of seeing everything vanish overnight, was etched into his bones. It was why the Lakehouse meant so much. They had found it together, tucked away in the Adirondacks, a 3-acre property with a small, weathered cabin overlooking a pristine lake. It needed work, a lot of work, but the potential was undeniable. For a moment, standing on that overgrown shore, it had felt like a truly shared dream, a place where they could finally plant roots. After the initial Aspen shock, I sat down and created a new financial plan, a disciplined one, the kind that left no room for error. Every dollar had a destination. I laid it out on the table, clear and concise, detailing how we could recover from the Aspen expenditure and still make an offer on the Lakehouse in 18 months. Bethany, unusually attentive that evening, leaned over the printout. She tapped a finger on the miscellaneous column, a small concession I'd built in for unforeseen expenses. "That's doable," she'd said, a rare note of agreement in her voice. For a while, she seemed genuinely excited, picturing mornings on the lake, evenings by a stone fireplace. And for a while, we stuck to it. The savings grew slowly but steadily. Each month, as I transferred the designated amount, a quiet satisfaction settled over me. I believed we were finally aligned, pushing towards that shared vision. The picture of the Lakehouse, tucked away in the Adirondacks, shimmered brighter in my mind. The first major deviation hit 6 months in. Bethany announced a spontaneous trip to Paris with Cindy Lou. An emergency, she called it, citing a last-minute opportunity to attend a renowned design exhibition. 2 months of our meticulously planned savings vanished with the swipe of her card. Cindy Lou's Instagram, however, told a different story. Champagne flutes clinking on a balcony overlooking the Seine, shopping bags from Rue Saint-Honoré, not a single exhibition catalog in sight. My frustration grew, a tight coil in my chest. Bethany simply shrugged. "It was an investment, Hank, for my creativity." The pattern continued. A designer handbag, an absolute necessity for the new season. A weekend spa retreat in the Berkshires, for my mental health, darling. Then on a whim, she decided the guest room needed a complete overhaul. "It's too bland." My clients expect a certain aesthetic when they visit. Each time I'd sit back down at my desk, the spreadsheet open, and adjust the numbers. The Lakehouse timeline pushed further and further away, 6 months becoming 2 years, then 3. I swallowed my frustration, telling myself it was a temporary setback, a phase, but the taste of it grew bitter. The Aspen trip announcement, coming just 6 months before the new revised offer window for the Lakehouse, felt like the final straw. It wasn't just the money, it was the casual disregard, the assumption that I would simply adjust, absorb the impact. Bethany's demeanor grew increasingly detached. Her focus shifted entirely to her own desires, her social circle, and her burgeoning career. She was often out late, her phone buzzing with calls and texts from clients, friends, or sometimes just an important connection. I started to feel like a stranger in my own home. The silence between us, once comfortable, became heavier than any argument. It was a silence filled with unspoken expectations and quiet resentments. A growing sense of resentment simmered beneath my calm exterior. The dream I had built, piece by piece, slowly eroding. I'd catch myself staring at the wall, questioning my priorities. Was I truly the boring one, as Bethany so often implied? Was my need for security and stability a flaw? But the memory of my gambler father, the constant fear in my mother's eyes, those childhood fears persisted, unyielding. They were not something I could simply shake off. Bethany began spending more and more time away. Client meetings often stretched into overnight stays in the city. Design inspiration trips took her to Miami, then to Los Angeles. I tried to reconnect, to bridge the growing chasm. "How about a quiet dinner in tonight?" I'd suggest. "Or maybe we could drive upstate this weekend, just the two of us." But she was always too busy, or had already made plans, her schedule a labyrinth of commitments that never seemed to include me. The Lakehouse, once a beacon of our shared future, now felt like a solitary burden on my shoulders. It was my dream, my responsibility, and increasingly, my quiet shame. Late at night, long after Bethany had fallen asleep, I'd find myself staring at the savings chart, the meticulously planned lines mocking my lost hope, a testament to a future that seemed to be slipping through my fingers. Subtle changes began to surface, like weeds pushing through cracked pavement. Bethany's phone, once casually tossed on the counter, was now always face down. Late-night texts would arrive, and she'd quickly dismiss them, a practiced flick of her wrist. Just Cindy Lou, she'd say, or a client chasing a deadline. But the urgency in her movements, the way her eyes darted away, told a different story. Her clothing choices became bolder too. New outfits appeared with increasing frequency, vibrant colors and daring cuts she hadn't favored before. They were always for work events or industry mectors I wasn't invited to, affairs she attended alone, returning late, sometimes with the faint, sweet smell of a different kind of perfume clinging to her silk scarf, not her usual light floral scent. It was subtle, a muskier, heavier fragrance that hinted at something foreign. I started catching her in small, dismissive lies. "Where were you, honey?" I called. "Oh, a late client dinner ran over. You know how it is." But the details would shift, the restaurant name changing from one day to the next, or the client suddenly morphing from a new startup to a long-established firm. Each lie, no matter how trivial, felt like a tiny cut, deepening the cold knot of dread tightening in my stomach. My intuition, a quiet alarm bell that rarely rang, was screaming. Something was profoundly wrong. I started observing her more closely, almost against my will. The way her eyes would dart away when I asked a direct question, the forced casualness of her replies, a nervous habit of touching her hair she hadn't had before. The woman I married, the one who toasted to knowing exactly what we want, was slowly being replaced by a stranger. Then a strange charge appeared on our joint credit card statement. A weekend stay at a boutique hotel, 2 nights, out of state, in a town I'd never heard her mention. It wasn't part of any client trip she'd ever detailed. I brought it up over breakfast, trying to keep my voice even. "This hotel charge, honey? What was that for?" Bethany didn't miss a beat. Her story flowed, convoluted and overly detailed. "Oh, it was a last-minute design conference, very exclusive. I didn't want to bother you with the details. You know how dry those things are. Cindy Lou was going to join, but she had a family thing." She smiled, a little too brightly, before taking a sip of her coffee. The explanation felt flimsy, like a carefully constructed facade, and I felt a profound sense of isolation, realizing I could no longer trust the person I shared my life with. The old spark in Bethany's eyes, the one that had first drawn me in, was gone, replaced by a guardedness, an impatience that manifested in sharp, quick movements and an almost constant tapping of her foot. It was as if she was always waiting for something else, somewhere else. One quiet evening, driven by a desperation I couldn't ignore, I secretly checked her phone bill. The paper felt heavy in my hands, a violation. My heart hammered against my ribs. There it was, an unfamiliar number, appearing repeatedly in her call logs, with long durations, sometimes stretching late into the night. My stomach churned with a mix of immense guilt and shame for invading her privacy, yet a desperate, burning need for answers compelled me forward. I memorized the number, my mind racing. The emotional distance between us had widened into a chasm, filled now with unspoken suspicions and a growing suffocating fear. I began to sleep fitfully, the Lakehouse dream, once my sanctuary, now overshadowed by a waking nightmare. Every creak of the floorboards, every whispered word from her side of the bed, seemed to confirm my worst fears. Then I found it, tucked deep in her purse, forgotten, a small laminated valet ticket. It was from a restaurant, not one I recognized, a place with a name that sounded too intimate, too exclusive. The date on it was 2 weeks prior, a night she had claimed to be working late on a client presentation. The cold dread solidified into a heavy stone in my gut. The valet ticket confirmed my fears. I typed the restaurant's name into my phone, the screen casting a pale light on my face in the dark kitchen. High-end, romantic, known for its intimate booths and discreet service. Definitely not the kind of place for a client dinner, unless the client was also a lover. My stomach churned, a bitter acid rising in my throat. Next, I dialed the unfamiliar phone number from Bethany's bill. It rang twice before an automated voice answered, identifying the line as belonging to Arthur Finch, a local real estate developer. The name meant nothing to me yet. My hands trembled as I typed Arthur Finch into a search engine. Images filled the screen, and there she was, Bethany. In one photo, she stood beside him at a charity gala, her hand resting lightly on his arm, a bright smile on her face. In another, they were at a gallery opening, leaning close, their heads almost touching, his arm around her waist. It wasn't just proximity, it was an undeniable intimacy in their body language, a comfort level that spoke of more than casual acquaintance, a physical blow. That's what it felt like, a fist to the gut, stealing my breath. A primal scream trapped in my chest, and the world around me tilted off its axis. I sat there, the printouts scattered on the table, the glowing screen of my laptop reflecting my hollow gaze. The silence in the house was deafening. I waited. Heart pounding, blood roaring in my ears, I waited for Bethany to come home. She was unusually late that night, the clock hands crawling, each minute an agony. When her key finally turned in the lock, followed by the soft click of the door, I didn't move. She walked into the kitchen, shedding her coat, her face alight with an unusual cheerfulness. "Hank, you're still up," she said, her voice light, oblivious to the storm brewing within me. She hummed a little tune as she set her purse down. "Who is Arthur Finch, Bethany?" My voice was low, steady, betraying none of the chaos inside. She froze. Her hand, halfway to the refrigerator door, dropped to her side, her face drained of color, turning to a pale mask. She stammered, "Arthur, he's just a client, honey. You know, a big developer. We've been working on a new project." She tried to smile, but it faltered. I pushed the valet ticket across the smooth surface of the kitchen island. Then the printouts, the photos of her and Arthur. Smiling, touching, undeniable. A client at the Waverly Inn? On a Tuesday night when you told me you were working late? And at charity galas? What kind of client is Arthur Finch, Bethany? Her eyes darted from my face to the evidence on the counter. Her composure crumbled. She collapsed into a chair, burying her face in her hands. Deep, racking sweat shook her shoulders. "It's not what you think, Hank. It's complicated," she whispered, her voice muffled, avoiding my gaze. "Complicated?" My voice remained low, but it held an edge sharper than any knife. "Tell me everything. No more lies. The truth." The demand felt like a physical weight, pressing down on her, on me. She lifted her head, her eyes red and swollen, tears tracking paths through her makeup. "You're never here, Hank. You're always with your spreadsheets, your budgets, always focused on the future, the Lakehouse, never on me. I felt unseen. You're so obsessed with money. He made me feel alive again. He understands." The confession was raw, painful, a torrent of words that shattered years of trust, of shared dreams, of everything I thought we had built. Each word was a shard of glass, cutting deeper. A chilling emptiness settled over me. The woman I married, the one I had loved and trusted, was a stranger. Her explanations felt like a hollow attempt to justify the unforgivable. I couldn't bear the sight of her tear-streaked face, her weak excuses. I pushed myself away from the island, the scrape of the chair loud in the silent kitchen. The Lakehouse dream, once a beacon, now echoed like a mocking, hollow sound in the vast emptiness she had created. I walked away, leaving her weeping at the kitchen island, toward the silence of the guest room. I spent the night on the couch, the rough fabric scratching my cheek. Sleep wouldn't come. My mind replayed Bethany's confession, her tearful excuses echoing in the dark. Unseen. Boring. The words stung, a bitter taste in my mouth. She had twisted the truth, reframing her betrayal as my failing. This wasn't just about money, about the careless disregard for our shared future. It was about respect. It was about fidelity. The deep hurt slowly congealed into a cold, hard anger, settling in my bones. At dawn, I called Mike, an old college friend who'd carved out a successful career as a divorce lawyer. Mike was all practicality, no nonsense. "I need to talk," I said, my voice hoarse. "It's about Bethany." He listened, his silence a solid presence on the other end of the line. When I finished, he gave me precise instructions. "Quietly gather all your financial records, Hank. Joint accounts, separate accounts, credit cards. Document everything. Don't make any rash moves. Don't confront her again until you have your ducks in a row." I followed his advice to the letter. Over the next few days, I systematically reviewed every financial document, every statement. I started with our joint accounts, the usual suspects of her impulsive spending. But then I dug deeper, accessing records for her business, the interior design firm I had helped her launch, even co-signing the lease for her studio. That's when I found it, a separate account, one I hadn't known existed, funded by transfers from her business. And from that account, large sums of money had been transferred, not to suppliers, not to employees, to Arthur Finch's company, not a client, a business partner, or perhaps something far more insidious. It wasn't just an affair. It was financial entanglement, a web of deceit that potentially involved fraud related to her business, using the very network of contacts I had helped her build. The betrayal deepened, extending beyond our marriage to my professional reputation, to the very foundation of my life savings. My stomach clenched with a profound sense of foolishness. I had co-signed her studio lease, connected her to some of my most influential clients, each all out of love and trust. She had used my support to fund her infidelity and possibly her illicit business dealings. I started journaling, a stiff, leather-bound notebook becoming my confessional. Meticulously, I documented Bethany's spending, the affair's timeline as I now understood it, and my own emotional state, trying to articulate the complex tangle of anger, hurt, and growing resolve. The cold realism Mike had advised was slowly becoming my own. Bethany, sensing the shift in my demeanor, made attempts at apology. She offered reconciliation, tears in her eyes, saying she'd make it right, that we could fix things. But my heart was a stone. "It's too late for apologies, Bethany," I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. I saw the flash of surprise in her eyes, then a flicker of fear. To buy myself time, to gather more evidence, I pretended to consider reconciliation. "Give me some time," I told her. "I need to think." The words felt like a lie, a calculated move that pained me, but a necessary one. I couldn't afford another mistake. The Lakehouse, once a symbol of our shared future, a quiet place of refuge, now transformed into the prize in a war I didn't ask for. It became a tangible measure of justice, a concrete stand against the deception. I vowed silently, holding the heavy journal in my hands, she would pay the price, and I would claim what was left of my dream. You'll want to stick around to the end to see how life's costly choices unfold. I spent the next few weeks submerged in data. Every text message I could find from Bethany's phone, every email, every financial transfer from her business account to Arthur Finch's, every credit card statement, revealing her impulsive spending and secret hotel stays. I compiled it all, categorized, dated, and cross-referenced. The stack of printouts on my desk grew, a physical manifestation of her deceit. It was a cold, hard truth, laid bare. When I met with Mike again, his office was quiet, overlooking the city. I placed the thick binder on his desk. He went through it page by page, his expression unreadable. When he finally looked up, his face was grave. "Hank," he said, pushing his glasses up his nose, "Bethany's actions could lead to significant financial liability for you if we don't handle this carefully. That co-signed lease, those transfers, and for her firm, potential legal issues could arise. Fraud, perhaps, depending on how these transactions with Finch's company were structured." A new resolve solidified within me. My plan for the divorce wasn't just about separating. It was about ensuring Bethany faced genuine consequences for her choices. This wasn't vengeance, not in the hot, emotional sense. It was justice. It was about making her account for the price she had made me pay, not just financially, but emotionally, for the trust she had shattered. I started quietly making moves. I subtly consulted with Mr. Henderson, a key client Bethany had brought in through my network, ostensibly to check on his satisfaction with her firm's progress. "How's Bethany doing? Still as sharp as ever?" I asked, making it sound like polite conversation. His subtle hesitations, his vague comments about focus and priorities spoke volumes. I began to shift my personal assets, moving funds, restructuring investments, protecting what I could. I anticipated Bethany's attempts to claim more, to use her charm and manipulation to extract as much as possible. I used my financial expertise, the very skills she had once called boring, to identify every loophole, every clause in our lack of a prenuptial agreement, every bit of leverage I could find. The idea of the Lakehouse solidified into the centerpiece of my demand for restitution. It wasn't just a dream anymore. It was a tangible stake, a symbol of everything she had tried to take from me. It would be mine. During this time, I continued to play the part of the wounded but forgiving husband. I endured Bethany's continued half-hearted apologies, her promises to change, her attempts to smooth things over. Each feigned moment of consideration, each forced conversation, weighed heavily on me. The deception tasted bitter, but my resolve was firm. She needed to understand the gravity of her choices, the deep chasm she had created. I even contacted the owner of the Lakehouse property, a man named Miller. "Just checking in, Mr. Miller," I said, my voice steady. "Is the property still on the market?" He confirmed it was, and I expressed renewed, serious interest, hinting that I might be in a position to make an offer sooner than expected. It felt good to say those words, to lay claim to something real. I anticipated Bethany's arguments, her charm, her attempts to manipulate, her cries of being unseen or unloved. I prepared my counter-arguments, rehearsing them in my mind, stripping them of emotion, presenting only the facts. A cold calm settled over me. The emotional storm had passed, leaving behind a sharp, strategic mind. I practiced delivering my demands, alone in the quiet of the guest room, ensuring my voice would remain steady, my resolve unwavering when the time came. The papers were served on a Tuesday morning. Mike's assistant delivered them personally to Bethany's studio while I was at the office. I received a call minutes later, her voice shrill with disbelief, then rage. "What is this, Hank? Are you serious?" Her calm facade, the one she'd maintained through weeks of my feigned contemplation, crumbled. She came home that evening, not with apologies, but with a furious indignation I hadn't seen directed at me before. "You think you can just do this?" she demanded, throwing the documents onto the kitchen island. Her face was flushed, her eyes blazing. The terms I presented were cold, unyielding, full control of our joint savings, the immediate sale of our apartment, most of the proceeds allocated to me. It hit her then. She realized I knew, not just about Arthur Finch and the affair, but about the financial irregularities, the transfers to his company, the scale of her deceit. Her anger twisted into a frantic fear. She called her father. Mr. Sterling Caldwell arrived the next day, his presence filling the apartment with an aura of old money and thinly veiled disdain. He sat opposite me in the living room, his posture stiff. "Hank," he began, his voice low and firm, "let's be reasonable. Bethany is my daughter. We can settle this quietly, amicably." This isn't necessary. He was trying to strong-arm me, to use his influence just as he had at our wedding. I reached for the binder I had prepared. "Mr. Caldwell," I said, my voice even, "I agree, but reasonable means addressing the full scope of the situation." I opened the binder, pushing it across the coffee table towards him. Page after page of documented transfers, credit card statements, the dates, the amounts, the recipient company, then the photos of Bethany and Arthur. His gaze moved from the financial records to the images, his expression slowly changing from imperious to visibly shaken. He understood the potential scandal, the financial repercussions for Bethany's business, for her integrity, and for his family name. The confrontation was tense. Words exchanged like daggers, exposing the raw, undeniable truth of Bethany's betrayal. Bethany, watching her father's face fall, desperately tried to negotiate. "Hank, please, we can talk about this. I'll give you more. Just don't do this." She offered concessions, pleaded with her eyes, but I remained unmoved. You wanted to live like money was an infinite resource, Bethany. I told her, my voice quiet, steady. Now you'll learn the cost. The news of Bethany's affair and the financial improprieties began to quietly circulate within their social and professional circles. I made sure of it, not through gossip, but through factual, discreet conversations. My lawyer, Mike, ensured key individuals received accurate, unembellished information. I didn't have to make personal attacks. The truth presented plainly was damning enough. Her carefully constructed image, built on a foundation of effortless style and business acumen, began to unravel. Clients, particularly those I had introduced her to, started questioning her integrity, her focus, her judgment. The whispers turned into murmurs, then into outright concerns. Her appointments thinned, projects stalled. I watched, not with triumph, but with a somber sense of finality. Her world, so meticulously curated, so seemingly perfect, was starting to mirror the one she had shattered for me. The chaos and uncertainty she had wrought were now reflecting back onto her, a quiet, inevitable consequence. The divorce was finalized 6 months later, a bitter, protracted process that chipped away at everyone involved. But in the end, I secured most of my demands. Bethany lost significant assets, the shared accounts emptied, the apartment sold. Her business reputation, once vibrant, was irrevocably tarnished, her future uncertain. Arthur Finch, facing his own professional consequences from the scrutiny, distanced himself entirely, leaving Bethany isolated, her phone no longer buzzing with his calls. Mr. Sterling Caldwell, after a final heated argument about the disgrace and financial drain, effectively cut Bethany off, leaving her to face the wreckage alone. I sold the apartment, a place that once held the promise of our life together, with a quiet sense of detachment. It was just property now, bricks and mortar. I used the funds, along with my salvaged savings, to make an offer on the Lakehouse. The papers went through. It was finally mine. The dream felt different now, tinged with solitude, with the heavy cost of what it had taken to get here. The day I moved in, the empty rooms echoed my quiet resolve, a bittersweet victory. I reflected on the journey, the naive young man who built spreadsheets for love, the shattered husband picking through the debris of betrayal, the man who found a cold, quiet strength to fight for his truth. There was no grand satisfaction, no triumphant exultation, just a quiet sense of survival and the hard-won understanding of human nature. I began to renovate the Lakehouse, finding solace in the physical work of stripping down old walls, sanding rough wood, building something new from the ground up. Each swing of the hammer, each plank laid, was a small reclamation. As the sun set over the lake, painting the water in hues of orange and purple, a reminder of the raw, enduring beauty that still existed, I stood on the porch, a lone figure in the Midwestern dusk, contemplating the path ahead. I knew the scars would remain, etched deep, but so would the Lakehouse, a testament to what could be reclaimed even after everything falls apart. The silence around me was not empty, but full of the quiet promise of a new, if solitary chapter. The divorce papers were long settled, the bitterness a fading echo. Bethany, stripped of her assumed comforts and her carefully built reputation, had retreated. Arthur Finch was a ghost. Her father's silence was absolute. The apartment, that monument to our shared ambition, was sold, its proceeds now part of a new foundation. I bought the Lakehouse. It stood there, quiet and solid, precisely as I had imagined, yet different. The initial joy was tempered by the solitude that settled in its empty rooms. No triumphant cheers, just the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the gentle lapping of the water against the shore. I spent my days renovating, the physical labor a steady balm against the lingering ache. Each nail driven, each board planed, was a small act of rebuilding, not just a house, but a life. The scars remained, quiet and deep, but so did the lake, reflecting the endless sky. The silence here wasn't empty. It held the promise of a future I would build on my own terms, a testament to what could be reclaimed.